Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and this week we are taking a look at the movie that introduced all of us to the horrors of statistics.
8% of all household accidents involve ladders.
The movie that gave us Patrick Stewart talking like a pirate, and a movie whose production was such a disaster, the director Joe Johnston has stricken the film from his personal resume. That's right, today we are looking at 1994's The Pagemaster, directed by Joe Johnston and Maurice Hunt, and starring Macaulay Culkin, Christopher Lloyd, Whoopi Goldberg, Patrick Stewart, Frank Welker, and Ed Begley Jr. We'll dive into this movie's 3-year production, how it led to the most expensive arbitration in WGA history, its failure at the box office, everything that makes this movie still worth watching today, and its legacy over 30 years later. Now, this is one of those movies that I have no memory of seeing for the first time. As far as I know, the VHS tape has been in my life for as long as I can remember. But as a kid that was obsessed with storytelling, this movie really captured my imagination since it explored fantasy, adventure, and horror. I also think that the sequence where the mural melts and we get the living CGI paint is still pretty cool. Now, it doesn't look great in HD, but in the 90s on VHS, I remember it looked pretty cool. Although I'd be curious to watch this movie on tape now and see how it holds up. But really, what I remember from this movie are the 3 books that help our hero through the library. Whoopi is great as fantasy, Patrick Stewart sounds like he's having the best time as adventure, and Frank Welker is giving a really fun performance as the timid horror. There's also the way that the movie weaves in passages from classic stories throughout history like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Moby Dick, and Treasure Island, all of which are brief but incredibly entertaining. But before I start talking about the movie itself, let's go back in time and learn just a little bit more about how the movie came to be. And our story begins with David Kirshner and Bruce Smith starting Turner Feature Animation in 1991 as a sort of spin-off from Hanna-Barbera focused on making theatrical animated movies. And Turner Feature Animation also featured a lot of the crew that Kirshner had previously been working with on movies like An American Tail and The Land Before Time. So the first movie that Turner Feature Animation was to produce was The Pagemaster, which actually began life all the way back in 1985 when David Cassie was hired by Disney Television to draft a version of The Pagemaster that would have been a fully live-action TV show. And actually, you know what? Let's just get this bit out of the way now, because the screenwriting credits for this movie led to the most expensive WGA arbitration in history up to that point. Basically, what happened was that Cassie was hired to write the script under a WGA contract. However, once the project landed at Turner Feature Animation, producer David Kirshner decided to take a crack at a draft of the screenplay, and then the team also brought on Ernie Contreras to tackle a draft as well. However, when the movie was in post-production, Kirshner and the studio decided he should get sole screenwriting credit, citing that the project had moved from being mostly live action to mostly animated, and Kirshner was directly responsible for that. They also claimed because the movie was mostly animated that the WGA didn't have jurisdiction, but the WGA strongly disagreed with this opinion. So as the arbitration went on and got incredibly expensive, Fox, who distributed the movie, even threatened to just release it without the WGA approved credits, but the WGA filed an injunction, and long story short, at the end of the day, all 3 men were credited as screenwriters, with Kirshner and Cassie being given story by credit as well. As for the actual production of the movie, it took a full 3 years to get this movie fully made from start to finish, and this was also one of the first movies to ever feature live action, animation, and CGI all in the same movie. As far as casting goes, I mean, Macaulay Culkin was the biggest child star on the planet at the time, so securing him to be in this movie was a big deal. As for our voice actors, this was actually Patrick Stewart's first time ever doing voiceover work, and he clearly had a great time. Actually, he and Whoopi insisted on recording their lines together, and I do think it really adds some great chemistry to all of their line readings. The movie also went over schedule and over its initial budget before rising to a total of $34 million, and it sounds like a lot of that had to do with the CGI elements, although it sounds like the live action sections of the movie were a giant pain in the ass as well. Like I said in the intro, Joe Johnston was so dissatisfied with how this movie turned out, he doesn't even count it as one of the movies he made, which fair enough. He really did only do the wraparounds, but I do think they're incredibly well directed, but more on that in just a bit. And on November 23rd, 1994, The Pagemaster was released into theaters, and on its opening weekend, it would make just $4.1 million against its $34 million budget and place 8th at the box office, making the movie a massive disappointment for the new Turner studio. And I think a big part of the reason the movie failed is that it was obviously going up against some all-time great movies, but also it just did not get any love from critics, nor did it really have any good word of mouth. However, this was the 90s that we're talking about after all, so I'm sure once this movie was released on home video, it had to have become profitable over time, because this was another movie that I feel like just kinda came stock in most 90s kids' tape collections. Apologies for the interruption, but I wanted to just quickly jump in and ask that if you're enjoying the video so far, that you take a moment to either like the video or subscribe to the channel. Born to Rant is a completely independent channel, and I use absolutely no AI in the making of my videos, and if that means anything to you at all, your support would mean the world. And with all of that out of the way, I think it's time for us to put on a giant yellow raincoat and dive into everything that makes the Pagemaster still worth watching today.
He's possessed!
He's insane!
He's my kind of guy.
And what better place to start than with the live-action introduction of the movie, which was directed by Joe Johnston, who directed one of my favorite movies of all time, The Rocketeer, and he also directed the first Captain America movie. So the guy's got a real thing for sincerity, and I know he was unhappy with the final product, but I have to admit, watching this section now, I was surprised by how much it resonated with me, and I don't think I'd seen this movie in well over 20 years. But everything about the intro just still works for me, from Richard waking up and us getting the full layout of his bedroom with all of its cautionary signs, and then the quick convo between Mom, played by Mel Harris, and Dad, played by the always awesome Ed Begley Jr. We learn that Richard is very clearly an introverted, nervous little kid, and Dad has tried everything he can to break him out of his shell.
And now I'm building him a tree house in a tree he refuses to climb.
And Begley falling out of the treehouse is still a great stunt and made me actually laugh out loud. I also have always loved his line here.
Go down to Gutman's hardware store, buy a pound of these.
I really don't know why, it's just always something I remember, but I mean the real star of the show is obviously Richard's insanely cautious and up-to-code bike and all of his protective gear. Then we see some kids who taunt Richard before this massive storm really comes in out of nowhere, and honestly, in defense of this kid, if I was riding my bike through a tunnel and the lights started exploding like this, I would be scared too. Even as an adult, this would scare the crap out of me. And so would creepy Christopher Lloyd as Mr. Dewey. Also, I have to say, I think this whole live-action sequence looks incredible. Cinematographer Alexander Grazinski really gives this movie a nice, crisp look that makes pretty much every modern kids movie released today look like absolute garbage. And before we dive into the animated section of the movie, I also want to call out the excellent score by James Horner. The guy just really has a way of conveying heightened emotions in his scores. Okay, so back to the movie. Christopher Lloyd as Mr. Dewey gives Richard a library card showing him where the exit is, and then Richard immediately falls and straight up gets a concussion, right? Like, there's no way that didn't knock this kid's lights out for a good couple of minutes. But anyway, when he wakes up, we're in the animated world.
I'm a cartoon.
You are an illustration.
And we quickly meet both adventure and fantasy, and Whoopi Goldberg says some weird stuff as fantasy.
What are you doing grabbing me like that and messing up my pantyhose? Now I gotta straighten out my Little Mermaid underwear.
Like, what is that? The animated world does look pretty solid as well. The animators came up with a really cool visual style. I also love the set design detail of all the various titles of the books. There's some really great stuff spread out throughout the movie, which is very cool. Like, the Hounds of Baskerville reference is so awesome, and one I definitely only ever understood after seeing the Wishbone episode. Guys, remember Wishbone? I really wonder if that show holds up in any way at all. Anyway, the Hounds chase the trio, and we end up hiding in the horror section. And I mean, this middle section of the movie goes really fast, and the pacing is maybe rushed just a tad, but realistically, it's the beautiful animation that captured me as a kid. Like, Dr. Jekyll's house is so cool and creepy looking, plus we get introduced to our third book, horror, and I genuinely love the detail that the horror book is as scared as Richard. Plus, Frank Welker just absolutely nails this voice performance.
Don't go in there! It's scary inside.
And I actually think it was a really good idea that he recorded separately from Whoopi and Stewart. It really makes horror feel like the odd man out of the three. So once we're inside the creepy house, we're quickly introduced to Leonard Nimoy as Dr. Jekyll, and man, there's just some great imagery in this sequence, from the face distorting beakers and the way Jekyll mixes the drinks together, but it's the way Jekyll drinks and his transformation that has always really stood stood out to me. I just think it's some horrifyingly beautiful animation. Unfortunately, it of course leads to Mr. Hyde coming out and attacking our heroes, and Richard completing his first test of bravery when he swings on this vine to safety. And then our heroes find themselves in the adventure section, where we get to hang out in two classic books that I admittedly have never read. First, we get Moby Dick, and the animation for Ahab and the whale here is just absolutely beautiful, and honestly, even more horrifying than the stuff with Mr. Hyde. And after almost getting swallowed by the whale, our heroes are separated, with Richard only finding adventure and fantasy and horror being missing. Luckily, they're quickly picked up by pirates, but not just any pirates, Long John Silver's men, and they're on their way to get their treasure. And this is really fun stuff, but it also feels like the 90s were kind of drowning in Treasure Island adaptations between this, Muppet Treasure Island, Wishbone doing Treasure Island, and then we'd get Treasure Planet a couple years later too. But anyway, as the crew venture through the jungle, we get probably my favorite joke in the entire movie when the crew can't read the map.
No, it's east. Buy some broccoli.
Before Long John Silver corrects them.
It's west by a tree!
Go! And shout out to Jim Cummings, aka Darkwing Duck himself, for absolutely killing the voice of Long John Silver here. I also really love how the crew reacts to finding the treasure already dug up and a single coin left behind for them to split, which leads to a big mutiny before horror and fantasy show up to save the day, and Richard gets the chance to prove his bravery a second time when he picks up a sword and threatens Long John Silver. Unfortunately, Adventure gets his panties in a bunch because he got locked in the treasure chest during the fight, and I mean, my guy loves adventure and fighting, so he goes and storms off down the beach and is a real jerk to Horror, who then slinks off, only to be captured by some of the characters from Gulliver's Travels, but thankfully Adventure shows up to rescue him just in the nick of time. We also get a brief walk through the fantasy section. There's not really much here in the way of story, but the animation here is absolutely beautiful. And our heroes finally see the exit they've been looking for at the top of a mountain, and unfortunately, while climbing this mountain, Adventure's dumbass wakes up a dragon. I do think it's cute that he and Fantasy kiss here, and that he immediately ruins it. As for Richard, he finally grabs another sword, shield, and armor and faces down the dragon, only to pretty much immediately be swallowed, which is legitimately kind of terrifying, especially as a kid. I remember being very freaked out by this, but then in the belly of the dragon, he finds a copy of Jack and the Beanstalk and uses it as a way to escape from the depths of the dragon, which just fully rocks and looks so cool. So then the Pagemaster shows up and closes out our adventure after getting yelled at by Richard, who quickly realizes this adventure was the best thing for him. He wakes up in the library, gets special permission to check out 3 books instead of 2, and heads home. And I love the little wraparound here. It's genuinely hilarious in 2026. His parents get home from looking for Richard only to find him asleep in his uncompleted treehouse and decide to just leave him there. Like, what? Are you kidding? Wasn't there just a massive storm a couple of hours ago and your kid went missing? And after finding him, your solution is to just leave him outside in the cold? Absolutely insane parenting if you ask me, but also very 90s parenting. So over 30 years later, what is the legacy of the Pagemaster? Honestly, to me at least, it feels almost completely forgotten, and watching it again as an adult, I kinda get it. Even though there are plenty of charming moments and tons of beautiful animation throughout, I just don't think this movie had much of a cultural impact. Honestly, if we're talking about kids adventure movies that mix live action and animation, I think I would much rather watch James and the Giant Peach or even Rock-a-Doodle over the Pagemaster again. But that's not to say that I think this is a bad movie. I just think in the large pantheon of 90s kids movies, this one just doesn't quite have the same staying power as others do. But I really had fun revisiting it all the same. There's also the fact that this movie performed so poorly it ended up being only one of 2 movies released by Turner Feature Animation before they were folded into Warner Brothers Animation in 1997. But let me know in the comments, what do you think of the Pagemaster? Do you love it? Do you think it's kind of mid? What other classic books do you think they should have tried to tackle in the movie? If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. It truly means the world. And as always, an extra special thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon and all of our channel members here on YouTube. You all really make this channel possible, and I could not do it without you. Don't forget, there's a button to become a channel member right beneath this video, and or a link to join the Patreon in the description below. It would also mean the world if you could take a second to either like the video or subscribe to the channel. It really helps out smaller independent creators like myself. And that's going to do it for Born to Rant this week. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.